You guys want to listen? I don't know.
Is the microphone on?
Yes. But it's kind of far. So. All right. My name is Saoirse Hennessy. I was on this gap year with some of you people, so that's good. My presentation is on perspective, so I'm going to start. This trip began as a fun adventure. I was in a new place with new people, learning about new big ideas. And overall, it didn't feel real. One week, we left Plettenberg Bay, South Africa, to go to Robertson, South Africa, where we did similar healthcare work. In the township of Kubela, I shadowed a healthcare worker who visited people's homes and counted how many people were in the home and made sure they were doing things to keep up with their health, such as making sure children's vaccines were up to date or that family planning was being used. Then we came to one area in the township that was filled with immigrants from Lesotho. This was easily the poorest place I've ever been in my life. Dirt roads were the foundation for plywood homes. There was no indoor plumbing, and I knew this because I saw the communal toilets that were in desperate need of a cleaning. I met a 14-year-old girl who had given up on school long ago, and I saw little kids running barefoot over broken glass. And this event changed how I saw poverty. Poverty was no longer a term I could discuss in the abstract. It was real and it affected real people. It changed my trip. It was no longer just fun, but a way to constantly expose myself to new experiences and to broaden my perspective. This theme of broadening my perspective was integral to my trip and to my learning, and upon reflection of the past 7 months, it became the natural topic for my presentation. That was to look at the definition of perspective. And it's defined as a particular attitude or viewpoint toward or way of thinking about something, point of view. And at the beginning of the trip, my definition was pretty in line with this. If asked what perspective is, I would have said the way you see something. This trip has caused me to change how I define and how I value perspective. The first thing this trip changed was the power of changing your perspective for me. In South Africa, I was shadowing Anthea, a community healthcare worker. Every day, we walked around the township of Kranshoek where I lived and visited patients who were ill. And there was one day that was particularly challenging. First, we visited a woman who was suffering from AIDS and TB and had been recently diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. She was in a small, dark room with very little furniture and a concrete floor and was obviously suffering. Every breath was labored, and every breath seemed to cause her pain. Our next patient was an 80-year-old woman who had had polio and had been bedridden for most of her life. After seeing both these patients, I was a bit of a mess. I felt incredibly sad for these women. I immediately emailed my parents as soon as I had Wi-Fi and told them they needed to start traveling because they only had a few years before they were bedridden. My mom told me to calm down. She also works in hospice, and she gave me some advice that changed how I saw the situation. She told me I shouldn't pity these women. To suffer like that and continue on is a strength I should be honored to witness. She told me that my job was to be someone who brightened their day, and to go in looking at them with pity was not doing my job. So I took my mom's advice, and a few days later, Anthea and I returned to Mary's house, the polio patient whose name I've changed. And I went there without an ounce of pity and just a great respect for her strength, and my whole experience changed. We laughed about her upcoming birthday, we joked, and she was so friendly, and before we left, she sang me a song that she had learned as a little girl in church, and it was one of the most moving experiences of this whole trip. My other patient, unfortunately, didn't fare as well. She died a few days later, but I like to think she died content seeing her grandson running around the house with her daughter taking care of her, and she was no longer suffering. My mom's advice to me that day changed my perspective of these women from one of pity to respect, and changed how I saw my role, which led to my interactions to be far more fulfilling for me and hopefully for my patients as well. This trip forced me to see multiple perspectives at once. See multiple perspectives to issues that seemed black and white. This holistic view makes things more complicated, but in the end, always leads to more comprehensive solutions. For example, in Ecuador, we were replanting trees often cut down to harvest cash crops. The particular cash crop we focused on was palm oil, which came from African palm trees, which are an invasive species and cause a lot of environmental destruction. We spoke about the harm palm trees caused at length and were all in agreement the farming of them needed to stop. But one day, we went to work on a farm with Donia Luce, our program leader's host mom. She farmed palm oil and agreed to answer her questions about the practice. And in order to show our appreciation, we would help weed some of these African palm trees for her. It helped broaden how I saw palm oil farming. It was terrible for the environment, but Donia Luce was not doing this because she wanted environmental destruction. She was doing this because she was told it was a good cash crop and she had debts to pay off. She was an incredibly sweet woman who would meet us after a hard day of macheting and planting trees with cold juice and snacks. And it made the issue of palm oil more complicated for me to condemn. It was awful for the environment, there's no doubt, but it supported people's livelihoods. It made me appreciate that things are very rarely black and white, and treating them as if they are can cause you to dismiss good people for actions they have good reason for taking. It has reinforced the idea that you really need to understand all sides to an issue. More complex viewing has a place in the context of issues, has a place in the larger context of the world. One of the main questions we asked throughout the trip is, what is development? And when we discussed development, we saw a lot of flaws within the system. It was a top-down approach, solutions are often ineffective, and community members are ignored when developers bring development. And I believe all these issues stem from developers bringing too narrow of a perspective. All too often, they bring their values and points of view and ignore true community needs. It ends up being a waste of time and money for everyone involved. If developers changed how they saw their jobs, the system would change. They need to change is the fact they go in with a preconceived notion of what needs to be done. They should ask about what's needed instead of bringing a solution. They need to talk to community members and see what they need. Developers do not have all the answers. The people of the community know their culture, their values, and their needs far better than any outsiders. Developers need to change their perspective from seeing themselves as saviors with all of the knowledge to seeing themselves as facilitators for change that the community wants. Question throughout the trip is, what is poverty? And to answer that for you would be a whole nother presentation, so I'm only going to focus on one aspect, the idea of perceived poverty. This is when people who are doing fine financially compare themselves to others around them and feel as though they are poor. It leads to people trying to reach the material wealth of their neighbors. And while there's nothing wrong with having ambition, this is a fruitless search. There will always be someone wealthier who can buy more, and scientists have shown that people return to their usual level of happiness after major life changes, known as a hedonic treadmill. If they see themselves as poor compared to those around them, they will not be any happier if they reach the material wealth as their neighbor. It will never end in contentment. The perception that material goods are an indicator of flawed success is a flawed one. People who have more things are not any happier than those who have less. If that perception changed and people saw they had enough to live comfortably, that ache for happiness found in objects would disappear, and as a society, we would be better off. Another area where the world would be a bit better off is if we saw people's points of view more. When we understand what the other side values, we can begin to work towards solutions that are all-inclusive. An example of when I saw a blatant lack of understanding for other points of view was in South Africa. In South Africa, I had done a project with a few other girls on how race affects the healthcare system. As I'm sure most of you know, South Africa is a very big race issue with apartheid and all that. And we found that Black and colored people had far less money spent in their health care system as opposed to white people, because there's a public and a private healthcare system. And then in most provinces, the healthcare that Blacks and coloreds had access to was of substantially lower quality than what whites had access to. And as we presented, most members of our host families nodded in agreement, and they were all Black and colored. At the end, when we finished, a white woman began to ask us questions that turned very defensive and then just became blatant statements. And it was about how whites paid for everything in the country and how the healthcare system was good enough. This is a perfect demonstration of seeing things only from your point of view. The Blacks and coloreds felt they should have better healthcare and that they had been slighted throughout the history of their country, which is a fair point. And the whites felt as if they paid for everything and were continually being asked to pay for more and more, which is also a fair point. But at the end of the day, there seemed to be very little understanding of the other side. And the reality is, they all share a country, regardless of skin color. And if they can't begin to see the other side's needs, how will necessary change occur? And this is representative of countries all over the world. The first step to change is to be willing to have all parties sit down at the table and begin to understand what everyone's needs are. Without that initial step, inclusive change becomes impossible. After having my perspective broadened so much by these experiences, along with countless others, my definition has changed. I now believe perspective is your ability to understand not only your own point of view, but others as well, and to be empathetic towards their view. I also now see perspective as a necessity to create effective and positive change. So how do I keep gaining broader perspective? Well, first, it would be to take another gap year, but that's probably not going to happen. So reading books about different people and different cultures, reading multiple articles about the same issues so I understand all points of view, talking to different people. We tend to interact with people who are similar to us, whether we associate based on race, church, age, career. We spend time with people whose values are similar. Making an effort to interact with people who are different will help broaden my perspective. And of course, I'm not claiming to have mastered good perspective, and if this trip has taught me anything, aside from the importance of perspective, is that I have a long way to go when it comes to understanding others. Moreover, this need to having a broader perspective is becoming increasingly necessary. We live in a world where all of our problems are becoming more and more interconnected, and if we want to avoid negative unintended consequences, we need to strengthen our ability to see all sides. And on a smaller scale, the US is becoming more and more divided, and both sides simply dismiss the other because they don't agree. It's become more and more polarized until we stop yelling and listen and begin to see things from the other side. And that doesn't mean you need to agree with the other side, but then we will start the process of working towards a better America. One of the biggest things I learned from this trip is that people are all similar. We may have different languages and skin colors and gods, but at the end of the day, those are superficial differences because we all love our families and friends, we all hate our politicians, and we all just want to be happy and do what we can to have a good life. And if we have that empathetic perspective towards one another, effective and positive change becomes inevitable. The end. Questions or comments?